The results of investing in brand show up in three big buckets. Accelerate their marketing performance, right? You want to see results there. Community engagement. So like earning partnerships, enticing investors, generally raising the profile of your business and being a good corporate citizen. And the last one that I think is most important is culture. Big thing is workforce development right now. Like, how do you find good people to work and how do you get them to stay? Well, culture is a big piece of that. If they believe in what they're doing, brand has a story to tell. Well, they're going to come to work every day and give their best.
So as marketers, we always tend to fall in one of two camps. You're either in the brand marketing side or the performance marketing side. It's always kind of agreed upon that you can't really check both boxes with one directive or one campaign. In the past, it's always been super hard to justify the ROI of good branding as part of an actual marketing strategy, but few have done it better than today's guest, and his name is Jeremy Mumpower. Jeremy is the founder of Conspire Design Agency located in Worthington, Ohio. An agency founded 10 years ago based on the principles of connecting business owners to their brands. And in that time, Jeremy has helped hundreds of business owners create a brand that connects and inspires them to the reason that they started. He's actually found ways for these business owners to implement it into their actual marketing strategy. So whether you're a marketer or business owner, there's a ton of value for you in this episode. Expect to learn how to leverage the resources of business development organizations to create stronger impact for your brand, tangible ways to calculate ROI as part of a brand marketing strategy, and how to recognize a brand that connects you to the passion of where you started. My name is Andy Milligan. You're listening to Marketing by Design, a podcast brought to you by the Columbus chapter of the American Marketing Association, episode number 68 of the show. And without further ado, let's dive on in. Mr. Jeremy Mumpower.
Yeah, I mean, literally everything you said there is true about Brandcamp. So if you've ever started a business, certainly a creative business like ours, like agency style, you start with small business clients and you work your way up. And eventually a couple things happen. You realize, like, I can't do my best work on small budgets. I have to take 11 team projects at once. Yes, I said 11 team. That's not a real word. But many projects at once. And then your work gets watered down, right? Like, you're just putting out fires all the time. So you raise your prices, right? And any business coach you work with as you're trying to grow will tell you, like, get your prices up. That's one of the first things they always tell you.
Yeah.
So then your prices are up. But what happens when you've developed a passion for the part of the business that helps people accomplish their dreams, right? Like someone who's got a business, a startup, a restaurant, a coffee shop, it's a tech startup that they're dreaming of changing the world, whatever the thing is. We like to be in touch with clients that, like, we talk about skin in the game, like have emotional skin in the game, like they're vested in seeing their dream come to life.
By the way, if you're a marketing leader or a business owner and you want to start your reading habit, the Essential Marketer's Reading Checklist, the best books on business and marketing that you can browse through, test drive, see if you like, included difficulties, page summaries, actionable quotes, and a link to the cheapest place online if you want to buy it and read the whole thing for yourself. Literally a place to test drive a library of all the most helpful books on business without having to buy it beforehand and give you a chance if you want to see if you like it. First link in the description.
So what Brandcamp did was allowed us an innovative way to continue working with those folks. So to give them value, but now that we pull in these BDOs, sponsors, the business development organizations, now we can kind of like we find that middle tension of a cost that works for us. We're using repeatable content. So we're leveraging something we've invested heavily in, to productize. And we're still in touch with those small businesses and helping them really sort of fuel the fire, the passion and fire that they have that made them even step out in the first place to start a business.
Nice. Yeah, so do you get paid directly by the organizations, and then you can kind of make it worth however whatever their investment is based on what they can allocate towards it?
We have, yeah. I mean, maybe there's a different model that'll evolve out of that where, and there's always the chance that, like, we continue to work with that small business client outside of Brandcamp as they grow. So there's always the chance for additional projects. But what we've experienced so far is the easiest way for us to do it is just have the BDO partner pay the bill. So that's been less moving parts.
Yeah, it's a good solution because not every, and you hit the nail on the head. It's like everyone's going to tell you to raise your prices, but then or find a niche is something I want to talk to you about too. Is like that's such the commonplace advice you hear is you want to either niche down by service or by industry or by company size, something like that. But not everyone that you want to work with, that you have passion of, are energized working with, fits into that like neat white little box of like your ideal target customer. And so I think it's a really good kind of creative solution to be able to make those more accessible. And if you're energized by what you do and you have the chance to work with people that can kind of check all those boxes, I think it's a really good opportunity. So I think
Yeah,
it's really cool.
we definitely didn't want to lose touch with small businesses. We struggled with that for a long time. How do we reconcile needing to grow and make money with like, that's the left brain side of business, and the right brain side is the passion side, right? Like what makes us really love being creative? What makes us really love developing branding, that helps businesses move forward.
Yeah.
Those two things are kind of hard to reconcile.
Yeah, and usually branding and brand development is something that occurs for small businesses and startups. Like it's kind of at that beginning phase, so that you're meeting them where they're at. And also, too, I talked to one of our past guests, Kevin. He has a marketing studio in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he's like very much a small business marketing studio. And he says like there's a difference between you don't have to shoehorn yourself into being the affordable option just because you market yourself as working with small businesses. Like there's a delineation there. If you can really frame yourself as being an investment, even if it's for small businesses, usually, I mean, a B2B industry, B2B companies, they can understand what an investment looks like and they expect a return on that investment. So how do you go about kind of like positioning branding? It's kind of like an abstract concept. And this is, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here because like we do very similar things. But how do you like portray the value in something that is an abstract concept like branding and why it should be invested in and why it's worth, a share of marketing spend?
Yeah, like big or small, anybody who's going to have a successful business doesn't spend money. You spend money to make money. And if you're not making money, you need to quit that spend. And so, every contract we've ever written has been scrutinized by what is the ROI, and there's a lot of people in our business out there that will tell you like the the ROI of branding is like very nebulous and it's very ethereal and it's hard to measure. And it's not. You just have to know where to look, and we talk to every client that we work with, whether it's a traditional one-on-one client through Conspire or it's a brand camper. We try to, do a little bit of education and establish this idea that we think is very true. The results of investing in brand show up in three big buckets for your business. Everyone goes out and wants to pay for branding to like accelerate their marketing performance, right? You want to see results there. But there are a couple other big areas. One is community engagement. So like earning partnerships or, enticing investors, just generally raising the profile of your business and being a good corporate citizen. And the last one that I think is most important is culture. So what happens when you inspire your team to work as hard as you do and care as much as you do as a leader in any business? Well, a big thing is workforce development right now. Like, how do you find good people to work and how do you get them to stay? Well, culture is a big piece of that. If they believe in what they're doing and the brand has a story to tell that they're inspired to be a part of, they have an important role in that story. Well, they're going to come to work every day and give their best. And when that happens, the culture of a business can supercharge everything else about it, including, the development of marketing that will perform better, including the quality of community engagement that we're able to gather, like culture is something that we're really focused on.
Yes. Those are great points. I'm trying to like abstract that into like actual KPIs because this is something that I'm dealing with personally and like running the business is like how do you very much validate like how do you validate the services you offer like long term? So I'm thinking like employee retention. Your employees are staying longer on average. You've onboarded new team members. Like how is the camaraderie at the office or what's the work environment look like? And also like how is the performance of your actual marketing campaigns? Like those can actually be related to branding as well. And I think there's different subsets of like actual measurements within. So when you look at like people that are actually engaging with content marketing rather than it just performing well, I think that can be tied really closely to branding too. Because I mean, even like you and I, like the brands we follow the most, sports teams, things like that, like the content that they create that resonates the most, it gets like actual engagement, it gets watch time, it gets like buy-in, it gets people talking about it. It's not just the visibility aspect of it, which I think is in an area like today, like in marketing, like visibility is so much more over throttled than it should be. It's overvalued, especially with like all the reach of organic platforms, like especially on short form video and stuff like that. It's very overvalued to the point where it's it's honestly kind of sad because you can get something that's very low impact in front of a lot of people, and it's not going to lead to any type of conversion for the business or for any of your marketing efforts. So I think it's really key that you recognize that and can tie that back to the branding aspect of it, because it is hard to make that correlation, especially when it can be abstract. And I think a lot of what we have to do is kind of educate and explain how those things tie together, and it's not always an easy conversation. So
Yeah, you made a good point in there. Those three big areas: culture, marketing, performance, and community. Those are like if you stop there, those are very nebulous. Those are big, broad ideas. But how do you get more specific on KPIs? And we have a goal setting model that we use in every strategy. We take clients through that really identify some KPIs that could be indicators of those things. And you do. And sometimes what we tell every client that we work through that model with is like, sometimes you'll have to create a system to measure these things, right? Like you may not have it readily available, but the first step is identifying where you want to grow, one of those big three areas, and then identifying the thing you're going to track to see if your investment is paying off.
Yeah, that's a great point for sure. So I want to kind of like double click on where did the idea for your building the Brandcamp the way you did, where did that kind of originate out of? Was it something you kind of saw the opportunity for and then crafted? Or was it, an organization that said like, hey, let's give this a shot and then see how it goes, and you kind of iterated and refined it from there? Because I think like when I think of you and Conspire, that's one of the first things that comes to mind. And like I said, that's kind of playing back into the point where it's a very good PR piece for you guys. It makes you look incredible. It makes you look very sensitive. You can tell like you're on the resonance level with small businesses, not just being a small business, but also knowing exactly what they need, the quick wins, portraying the value of marketing even in the beginning. So where did the initial idea with that come from, and then how have you refined it over time?
Yeah, I like talking about this because the two first things are really common things that any business owner experiences. So as we went along our way over the course of the first 5 years of the business, we fine-tuned our approach, right? And so that's where the brand kit content came from. But then what happened to everyone is COVID, right? Like suddenly we have to figure out how we're going to work remote, right? And so we had this brand kit content, and we started to consider the idea that could we do it virtually? And the answer is yes, we have, and we will. Or could we make it a course, like a self-led course? And so in trying to get that off the ground unsuccessfully at that point, we kind of gave up on it for a hot minute. Then I was able to participate, right after COVID, in a business accelerator program where they wanted us to identify a growth opportunity. And, as I was rolling that possibility around in my head.
Was this the Goldman Sachs one?
Yeah, the 10,000 small businesses.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and so as I went through that process and really considered what we could do, I kept coming back to Brandcamp and trying to figure out why it didn't work the first time. And the reason that I arrived on was because we were trying to collect these groups of small businesses ourselves. And that was, a lot of moving parts and a little chaotic. And, once I realized that they probably weren't our best customer, our target customer, we really needed to be after those BDOs, right? Because a couple things happen. The big thing is they can offset the cost for the little guys.
Yeah.
But their demand, their pain point they're trying to solve for is like all the little guys look to their members for technical assistance to put out programming that gives them value for their membership dues. So once we realized that, we could partner with them. Not only are we selling them something that addresses like a huge pain point they have, but we're also able to kind of co-opt their voice in networks of small businesses to make a case for the value of this thing. So that's actually how it happened. It was a really subtle shift in like who we were targeting as our customers. Small businesses are still indirectly our customers, in Brandcamp. But who we're really selling to when we go out and run campaigns and we target customers we'd like to work with, those are the BDOs.
Yeah, that's a really good delineation too, because they say it from the beginning. We talked about it a little bit earlier, is like having your ideal target customer in mind, and you're creating this thing that's not just it's sort of like a win-win-win, because you're making the organizations look good, you're providing value to the members, and you're also making it worth your time on the investment side as well. So I think it's the creative parts of business like that like really personally like fire me up to make stuff like that work, because I think so much of being a business owner is like you see the problem and you have to find not just a creative solution to it, but you almost have to make it original, make it unique, make something work. And it's not always, it's usually pretty scrappy, and it doesn't look like something that's been done before sometimes. But when you create something that adds value, like I'm trying to think, was there like a one moment for you where you're like, okay, like, because I think we all kind of have like these light bulb moments, whether it's in business or creative, or because like an example that comes to mind is like when you're, one I'm sure you've had before is like when you're designing a logo and you finally, it's just like you're just like banging your head against the wall and you finally have that one moment where you're like, oh, okay, like I can kind of see it now. It's starting to take form, get into shape. It's starting to be real. Was there a moment like that, like in brand camps, where you're like, man, like we're getting a ton of value out of this. So are the small businesses. It's getting great feedback, and we're just enjoying it. Was there a moment like that sticks out to you?
Yeah. So our first brand camp we did with an organization called ECDI, and we had an account executive, so meaning she was in charge of helping the participants grow their businesses, and the president of ECDI. Once we introduced Brandcamp to them, they became like the biggest cheerleaders for the content. And they were just so enthusiastic and energetic about it that we started to realize like, oh, this isn't just us tooting our own horn. Now we have people that are really, I don't want to overplay this, but they're really desperate to offer their clients technical assistance, their business clients. And now they're saying like, this is like nothing we've ever had the opportunity to offer. So that's one. Our host partners becoming like really enthusiastic cheerleaders and supporters of our programming. And then I would say the other is for those indirect customers, the small business camper participants. One of the key deliverables we give each camper is a brand anthem. So we help them, one of the exercises, we help them write sort of a narrative positioning statement for the brand. And then on our second, that's the first session. On the second session, we present those. So we ask them to stand up and read their brand anthems. And that is the first time some of them get to read their brand anthems. And, when we see like tears shed over that because people are able to articulate what makes them so excited about what they're attempting to do, that's a moment. That's a really powerful moment. And those two things are both really significant things that have happened that we knew this thing had legs and it was worth doing.
Yeah, because it's something that they don't teach you, right? They teach you how to, even in business school. And by the way, like a ton of people that start businesses are not going through the traditional like MBA business program. So they don't have like even the traditional business knowledge, but neither did I. But some people don't go through the foundational steps of like what it takes, what actually building a brand is. I think it fills that such a great hole in that. And kind of like circling back on the last point was finding other people's needs when you're doing business, and to do that with where you are. So I still have you guys. Love how it kind of checks all the boxes, win-win-win, and I'm looking forward to see it develop into more in the future. So very stoked for you guys. But I'd like to kind of like highlight back, and I don't know if you've ever heard of the Tim Ferriss podcast, but he does this thing where he kind of zooms in and zooms out, goes very granular and detailed with the business, and then kind of zooms out. And I'd like to get to know Jeremy, the founder, a little bit more.
Oh.
So what led you to, I know we've talked several times now off camera, but you've done like the traditional agency model. You've worked at a lot of different places. You have a lot of experience sort of in the creative industry. You have a very good finger on the pulse in terms of design and what people get value out of, and marketing and creative and so forth. What led you to build Conspire to where you are now? Because a lot of the listeners of this show are business owners. And so speaking as a business owner, we kind of touched on how you go about creating good services and people think products that meet people where they're at. But what led you to getting started, and what inspires you to keep going?
Well, I think like math and science led me to get started. I didn't want to do any of that. So once I realized like, okay, I'm probably pretty right-brained, then it's like, what do you do with an artistic inclination? I didn't want to be a painter, and I wasn't as good of a technical artist. Like I couldn't hand draw things like some of my artistic friends could. And actually I have an older brother who's a graphic designer. And once I realized that was a thing and started to pursue it, I realized I really like that. And you can quickly learn those skills. Whereas like, the fine arts are a little different.
Yeah.
Some people are just gifted, and I wasn't one of those. And honestly, but I could write a little bit. I think my mom will always tell me she thought I would be like an ad campaign guy, like a madman. Right.
Okay. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it right now.
So anyways, I went through, like you said, I've never had a real job after college that wasn't agency side. Like I've never had an in-house job. So it's all I know. And after kind of running through that ringer for a while and I started my own business after being laid off from a previous job, and I thought it was temporary. I was like, I had some freelance projects. Let me just ride this wave for as long as I can. And that wave never stopped cresting. So, about a year into that, I realized, well, let's make a business out of this. And if I made a business out of this, what would I want it to be? And I thought if I could sit and design logos all day, that would be a pretty cool job. Then I realized like you have to bring a lot more value to the table to like get paid well for logo work. So we started to develop what would become Brand Kit, our strategy content. But in the meantime, I sort of like really started to try to be introspective and be like, well, what do I like about logos so much? That visual representation of the brand. And really what I arrived on, I'm a big Cincinnati Reds fan, a big baseball fan. And I shared that with my dad and my granddad. And it's like really over my life become part of my identity. And, we go to these games and there's all these strangers that, feel just as passionately about something as I do. And I don't know anything about them, but it connects us,
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about this common inspiration that we had. And that actually became the basis for the name of our business. So a lot of people know this locally, but Conspire means connect and inspire. And I think that branding connects people to purpose. And if you can do that, you can inspire them into action.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I think you hit the nail on the head there is because personally I'm at like a very similar kind of season in life where, you start the freelance thing and then you're in that like messy middle where you're trying to find like what your unique positioning is, the value you offer. And,
don't forget to try to find what you love the most about what you do too.
Right. Too. And that's kind of what I heard you unpacking. Well, what I was taking away is that you're self-aware on what you enjoy doing the most, but then you're also realistic to the point where, okay, there's things that I do that I like doing, but there's also the other pieces that people get the most value out of. And how do you kind of find that like middle of the Venn diagram to where you're doing what you enjoy and you can get paid well for it and you're adding the most value to, and you kind of find that middle ground and make that like, and really just throttle that and build a business out of it. And I think it's simple, but it's also very complicated because it's uncomfortable when you're going through it to kind of figure out what that middle looks like. Like you have to be very real as to where you get your energy from when you're working, the skill sets that you're actually best at, and it may not be the same thing that you enjoy doing. I think it looks like saying yes to a lot of things, especially in the beginning, trying a lot of different projects, like always one that's just a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And there's a fine line there because you don't want to dive into a project you have no expertise in and underdeliver. But I think it is a very messy middle to be in that place, especially when you've had the agency and the job experience, and then you have to basically get thrown into the deep end of like, okay, you have to define yourself as a business. And I think that's why you connect so well with small business owners, is that you've gone through that traction phase where it's like, okay, you really have to encapsulate attention and define and make it clear what you do and how you add value. And I think there's, especially with smaller creative or marketing organizations like ourselves, it's like that's the advantage, is that you are in touch with that beginning business owner mindset, and you can help them work through that and use our skills in creative and design to not just help them get started, but also define their marketing strategy and so forth, and actually put words to your own unique value, because it takes talking to other people, it takes reps, it takes putting things out there and then not responding well, and then seeing how things make you feel throughout the day, and then finding what you're good at. So it's always a kind of an uncomfortable and vulnerable position to be, especially as a small business owner and just getting started. But to see someone stick into it for the long run like you have is pretty inspiring. So,
well, it is the long run, man. It's a roller coaster. There's ups and downs to it, but I appreciate that. I think it really all comes down to is like figuring out what you love about what you do, and then figuring out how to talk about that as the solution to business problems for others, right? And you got to really know who you're talking to position your work that way. That's what you talked about with niching down earlier, and that's why it's so important. You got to know who you're talking to so that you can make them feel like you're talking directly to them, and you have a plan to solve their most pressing problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there, and as we kind of like touch on like the beginning phases of like Conspire and then refining your services, finding your unique value prop and so forth, was there ever like and we all make like failures and have mistakes and so forth, but was there any sort of one that you're very grateful that you had, that you maybe learned a lot from, or do you think set you on the right path towards, where you are now?
A big mistake?
Yeah, like a mistake, lesson, something that you learned the most from.
Well, recently I bought a cockapoo and I let him come to work with me and he poops on everything. But no, I would say
Noted.
I do have something in mind that I wouldn't say is a mistake, but I would say it was definitely a learning process. When I started the business, I had a business partner and he was just a really great friend. And honestly, partnering with someone gave me the courage to step out and try it. But I think he would tell you the same thing when the challenge came in, when we would go to make hard growth decisions for the business. Are we going to, put a stake in the ground here and commit to this, or are we going to do things another way? And I think, he's such a nice guy, and I would like to think, he would say the same about me, that like we were just worried about each other's feelings and we would never make hard decisions. So I would say the learning there was we went our separate ways, and it was, we're friends again now. And I think the learning there was like, as a small business, having a 50-50 partner is very difficult. I would recommend an odd number so you can vote on things. Yeah. But certainly, like as a solo entrepreneur going Conspire, it does streamline the decision-making process. Now, it makes your network and your effort to find mentorship more important, right? Because if you don't, then you're going to be in the dark in an echo chamber a lot of times.
Right.
But yeah, I think that like just something really simple and practical like that, like if you have partners, have an odd number.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice. I've never heard something, and it seems very simple, but yeah. I even think like, because it does streamline the decision making process, but also just the benefits of having someone else. And if it's two people, it'll be a similar benefit. But just like the sense that you're not in that echo chamber, that you're showing up for someone else every day, that you're validating your concept, that you can communicate ideas with, even if it's not verbally. It's just like, it makes it a lot more real when you're kind of showing up for someone else and you're making things happen, you're getting results for clients, and you can kind of have someone that is there with you, even if they're not on the ground level. I think really validates the concept of, business ownership, because it is hard to be the solo entrepreneur. And like I said, I'm preaching to the choir here, but even just having, it doesn't even have to be a business partner. So I would encourage like any small business owners, if they're in it for themselves, to just have someone that like, okay, you're my objective business partner. Let's get on the phone maybe once a week, once a month, and just like, I'll share with you everything that I'm doing throughout the day, and you can just give me objective feedback in a way that's, not sparing of my feelings, because that's important. And I think feelings get in the way a lot in business, especially when there's people involved. So it's really hard to, I think, find that person that can be objective and also have your best interests at heart. And as we build, like that's something I'm always kind of thinking about, is not just how these relationships that I can make are beneficial, but also force me to be uncomfortable, and like will offer objective feedback and will just help me grow, because growth always kind of occurs like outside of that comfort zone. If you have someone that's just praising you and validating your feedback, which in turn tends to be a lot of the stuff on social media, it's all very surface level. It's all very, you're killing it, great content, love to see your projects. It's not the real stuff that you can actually make tangible and then transmit into like future decisions. So having people there, I think, is a really, really big thing I'm looking to implement for sure. But
yeah, being a solo entrepreneur, I mean, it's hard. It's a lot of work, but it can be lonely too. So, I tend to, you mentioned earlier, I'm in the middle of life and it's busy. I have kids doing different things all the time, but it can be lonely. And so like, if you're out there and you're doing, if you're someone out there and you're doing what Andy's trying to do, I would encourage you to like, go get involved in professional networks. Nobody likes a mixer, but have courage and go to things like that. Andy, you do a really good job of getting out there. And I would say, like, if you're like me and you think, like, I just hate that stuff, I don't enjoy it, you got to look at it like anything else in regards to your business. If you have a weakness, you got to address it. You got to attack it, and find your way to be comfortable on the level that you're comfortable doing that sort of thing. But you got to get plugged into your community.
Yeah, it's so tough because, like, you nailed it on the head again. It's like, you want to lean into that thing that you're good at and that you get the most results out of. So it's like, I can say I love podcasting. I love having chats with Jeremy and Izzy, and this is how I want to do my marketing. But like, when you actually take the objective look at it, like, is this getting the most results? Is this bringing in leads? And I think people we're always going to default to what we're either best at, what we enjoy doing, or is most comfortable. And it's like it's going to those government mixers or those rotational networking events where it feels very forced and transactional. It's like it's so hard to recognize that feeling of discomfort and as actually being the sign that you're on the right path because it's so against your instinct.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just one day at a time, implementing something small like that, whether it's if you've never been to a networking event, getting one on your calendar and then holding yourself accountable to showing up. And then the good news is that it does get a lot easier after that. So there's so many things, like personally in my life, I'm trying to change. But then again, too, like we talked about, it's finding what you're good at, too, so that you can eventually shift the majority of your efforts towards. Because life, if we live our life in the sense that everything we have to do is uncomfortable if we want to achieve anything, then that's just like a horrible way to live.
I think we're talking about two separate things too. One is sort of business development. If you don't like going out and pounding the pavement and shaking hands, and you don't have to do business development that way. You can do email outreach. You can do social outreach. You can create a really killer, innovative referral program. But on the personal side of things, the other side of that is we're just talking about like good mental and emotional health, right? Like none of us are made to be in isolation. So if you feel that way, it's going to benefit both your business and your personal life to just like try to get out there in the capacity you're comfortable with and find your community.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point, actually. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mix of both. So keeping a tabs on what you're good on and also what you're good at and you enjoy doing. And then I think the mental health side of it also ties in really well with the business ownership, because I know especially people that are doing it by themselves, it occupies a lot of your mind space during the day. And I think like even personally, something I'm trying to get better at is detaching Andy from business. And I think a lot of business owners are doing that too, is like, especially like when you're remote, dude, and you're doing it by yourself, it's like you can just do this all day and all night. And if you have a good day at work, like work by definition kind of is your life. So you're basing your self-worth and values and all your emotions based on whatever happened on the laptop that day.
That's right.
I think it's kind of stepping back from that. And that's what I think there's a big value in, like forcing yourself to do kind of the networking side of things and the trying different things as far as your actual outside of work. But then again, like there's threads that can make that beneficial towards your business too. So it's kind of a happy medium there for sure. But as something I would like really value your opinion on, especially, and would be like how your kind of priorities have changed throughout building the business to where you are now. I know you have a family and you're very, very intent on spending time with them. And especially towards in the beginning, I don't know how old you were personally when you got married, or that became more of a priority shift for you. But I've learned a lot from you in terms of just not just the technical business side of things, but also how you kind of orient your life around supporting what you want the business to be. So how have your priorities changed since you were younger and working in the agency model to business owner to where you are now?
Well, when I got married, it forced me to grow up. So I think that like I would have told you that, the one thing that has stayed the same in my priorities is my faith. So, I think about my relationship with God, and then my relationship with my wife, and then my kids, and then my friends who I feel like, my family, my extended family, and then my friends who I feel like are family. And then I have my business, right? And there are a lot of things that happen ahead of my business if I keep to those priorities. That's wild to think about. But that's the way I've always operated, like the business is here for me. I'm not here for the business. It should add to the value of my life, or I should go work for somebody again, so all these other bigger, administrative problems are someone else's. So that's the way that I look at it. Saying that is one thing, but learning and implementing that with consistency over time. Because like you said, I'm in a much different place now than I was when I started the business. And, there's some hard lessons along the way where, I had a mentor tell me once, like, when you get this busy in life, and we all do, someone is going to feel cheated with your time, no matter what you do. Make sure you have your priorities clear, and don't let it be the people at the top of the list, but the people lower on the list, sometimes it's going to feel, it's going to feel like I could have done more, that they're going to be disappointed in me. And, I think Conspire has been an amazing blessing in my life, and it's a healthy business, and we've been around for a decade, but sometimes it's been Conspire that gets the short end of the stick. And I have to have the faith that we're doing a good enough job here that it's enough. It's enough for the business to thrive and maintain. And, in the moment, it doesn't always feel like it's enough. But, in retrospect, keeping those priorities straight is such a critical thing for anyone that does what we do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's always kind of that concept of good enough. It's like finding that line, especially when you don't have like a ton of people that you're bouncing feedback off of. It's like, what is if you have your priorities straight, I think that's why it is so important to have those priorities straight like that. It's because then you can like look at your calendar and say like, what are actually my priorities?
Yeah.
And it's almost like choosing in advance what you're going to suck at. It's something I've said before, is you can't do everything perfectly. You can't be the perfect family man and also have the business maybe of your dreams. You can't be 5% body fat and have the business of your dreams. You can't have all these things. So it's like being
you also can't be 43 and be 5% body fat. Maybe you can, but
hey, man, you can prove us wrong. Figure it out. But I mean, that's why you have. I think so many people spend time staying busy and don't invest any time into becoming self-aware. So if you work a lot, I think that's great. If you're consistent with your core values and you know that you get fulfillment out of working a lot and you have acknowledged that beforehand, that it's going to come at the expense of other things, and this is true regardless of business or industry or just anything in life, I think you can lean into working hard if you have acknowledged beforehand that, okay, maybe this is a phase of life where I have to do that, or it's going to come at the expense of these other things. And then when the expense comes, and maybe it's in the form of your relationships or with your health or anything else, it's important that you step back.
Those are two expenses you don't want to pay that bill ever.
Right.
Your health and your relationships. You don't want that to be an expense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think it's the intentionality beforehand, and I think the acceptance that you really can't have it both ways, and I think we delude ourselves a lot of the times into thinking that it can be. So
yeah, that's really smart. Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so it's something I asked a lot of guests, especially the ones I look up to, but and this has probably changed kind of throughout your life, but what is an ideal day in the life look like for you? So a little bit of context, like there's this YouTuber named Ali Abdaal, and he basically has this summary of like, okay, I'm going to make a separate Google Calendar, and if I were living my dream life, like when I was a kid, or even now, like if I could spend my time, money wasn't an object, if I was doing the things that truly fulfilled me and aligned with my core values, like how would that manifest itself in my daily schedule? So like, what do you think that would look like for you? I know it's a very honest question, but would it look like more of a technical approach, like you're doing design work? Would it look like more of an outbound approach? Or would it look like something totally different? Or would it look like you're bouncing between different things? So what do you think it would look like kind of off the top of your head?
For me, it would look like a completely open calendar. I really want to spend my time and my energy like doing things that make our world, our community a better place. The last several years with Izzy and several other people on board on my team, I was just telling Izzy this the other day, I'm really proud of how independent they've become. Some of that has to do with systems and processes, creating those things that other people can grasp and run. But some of it just has to do with, surrounding yourself or trying to surround yourself with really bright people, really talented people. I've gotten to do a lot of really cool, fun work in my career. And at this point, I'm getting a lot of gratification out of like seeing other people grow and trying to contribute to that, but also seeing the business, maybe run without me. It doesn't need me to be its best. It needs me to be a presence, and make sure that everything is working properly. But to do the work, there are people younger with more energy like you guys that are, I would say far more talented than I was at your age. And so to have Conspire, be self-sustaining and run itself mostly, and have my time freed up to like serve at a food pantry or mentor someone else, or, I did mention I'm 43 and things start to happen to your body. Like, so focus extra on your health. Those are that's the ideal day for me. I tend to be my wife says I don't like to plan, which is not true, but I do value being flexible, so and I guess there's a little spontaneity in that, waking up and having some freedom to not to do what you have to do, but to choose what you want to do. That's what I really work for. Everybody loves money, but a big part of what I've tried to do with Conspire is like, let's work in the way that we want to work and do the work that we want to do that's going to help people that want to change the world for the better. And those are the things I'd like to focus on. So having the flexibility to do that and not maybe sit in front of a computer or answer emails.
Yeah, that's a good reframe on it. And I've heard kind of the concept of like maker time versus manager time. So like right now I'm trying to think how like the majority of my time is spent in being more conscious on it because I feel like I'm very reactionary in terms of my inbox and the way certain projects are going and stuff that's honestly just outside of my control. Like my day will be dictated by, and that's kind of the cruel dichotomy of like entrepreneurship is like you leave having one boss and now you have 20 bosses. And I think it's a lot of that is in how you kind of conduct yourself in that relationship to set expectations and take control of your time, which is definitely something I am in the process of learning and getting better at, which we all are.
Absolutely. I just the last couple of years read a book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And if you're a business owner, no matter what kind of business, you should read it because your time and your energy is the most valuable asset you have. And you know, the further you go with your business and your life or anyone, the less of that you have. You know, the more of it's committed elsewhere. So it's such a valuable commodity. Learning to manage that in the most useful way possible is probably the most important thing you can spend time on.
Yeah, and I think the younger you can learn that, like it's almost like you don't appreciate what you don't have in that phase of life. So it's hard. I think it's just naturally, it's harder for younger people to place an emphasis on the value of time until they have less of it. It's the same way like with people in life. It's like when they're on their deathbed, all they wish they would trade all their money for more time. And then when you're young, you would trade all your time for more money.
Yeah.
And I think just trying to capture like the small moments throughout the day where we're like conscious of like, okay, the grass is always going to be greener to some extent. And that's what I'm trying to value more is my time is like, that's why I'm like, even with that like ideal schedule is like, if money were an object, like what would I actually be doing in a day? And how can I orient my actions now to where that's actually reality? And, you know, I'm not having the regrets in terms of as a business owner, I spent too much time building something that is now unsustainable and is more of a time investment just to keep it going. And I think that's kind of the difference of building a business versus building a job, especially because there's that fine line too. It's like, it's so energizing when you first start. And I know it's been a while, but you can probably relate is when you first start, especially after giving your time to so many other people and serving other people in a job and getting paid to make other people's dreams come true. It's so energizing when you start to do that for yourself and you're like, okay, I'm the sole beneficiary of all these hours I'm putting in. And I think business owners kind of fall into that trap of putting too much time into something because it's motivating in the beginning. And then you set up systems and processes to where all of a sudden like that's now maintenance level and you're kind of forced to keep up with that. And it's just setting an unrealistic expectation. So I think the whole buy back your time and the principles around that are, you know, really foundationally key. So very top of mind for me as well.
Well said.
But one last thing I wanted to ask you, because I know I'm mindful of your time, very grateful for your time actually.
Yeah.
Is what would you say is your unique sort of like entrepreneurial edge, you know, your unique advantage? Like, how do you think your personality, your unique characteristics, what's something that you bring to the table that you don't think anyone else could in terms of building your business and building this life that you have?
I mean, one thing I say about Conspire, you know, when people ask you what your, you know, people call it different things, but your value prop is, I think, you know, for us, it's, you know, big agency results with small business relationships. And so, I always joke around and say like, well, in the past, I've said this about myself, that I'm like the redneck of graphic designers. Like I don't have this pedigree. I do have a bachelor's degree. I won't talk about where, because I won't disparage any university now that I've said what I've said. But, you know, I've told other designers who've come from art school that I got my degree over at Jackbox and, you know, I'm self-taught, you know.
So I know you went to Bowling Green. I went to Findlay, so we're like right in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I can validate and also agree,
and it was a great school, and I went to a community college prior to that, and that was a great school. Mm-hmm. But I think like just, you know, we stay grounded. I think we do world-class design work, but we're not like elitists. You know, we know that our work is not primarily for us; it's for someone else, and they have to own it and be proud of it at the end of the day. And sometimes, you know, clients give you chicken poop and ask you to make chicken soup, you know, and that's really the magic of what we do. If we can deliver on that and provide an effective business tool and also be happy with the creative visual piece of it, you know, that's a big win. And we value that, and we just treat people like people. You know, we've talked a lot about that over the last half of this interview. Like relationships and people are the most important thing. And I don't say that because it sounds like the right thing to say. I say that because I value it, and I've built my business that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's very clear, like in your guys' messaging, it's connecting people and brand. And I think you do a very good job of kind of capturing that emotion part of the business, and then how you transmit that into what you do is design, branding, and marketing. So
it's gonna become more and more important. Of course, we had,
yes.
we're in a virtual remote world now, but we're gonna have virtual meetings more and more, and that's gonna get with like VR and AR and all of this, but also with AI. Just keep using all the letters. Like the more things become automated and artificial, like the more creative we're going to have to be about being human and having relationships with humans. Like that's
Yes.
going to evolve too, and we can't devalue that, because it's really what life is all about.
Dude, so much. Yeah. And I think and this is why we shouldn't be, I mean, and this is a whole nother rabbit hole down AI. We could talk for another
Right?
age about this, because I would really value your opinion on that too. But with AI and so forth in creative, it shouldn't scare the people that are like actually bringing value, because it's a totally different thing. It's when you're creating branding, when you're doing something original, it's the complete opposite of what AI is. It's original, it's people driven, it's taking stuff that you can't get from machine learning and putting a uniquely human spin on it that is unique to that exact business and what they represent. And it's hard to encapsulate that. And so, I mean, even with some of the most advanced tools, like I think we both use them to grow our business and for their respective use cases. But when it comes to creating something original as branding, that's actually a central piece of like what the marketing strategy that these AI tools can build upon. It's hard to do that without having the personal connection of like the brand itself. So that's my 2 cents for it. But dude, like I said, super great for your time today. This is the highlight of my day. I know we've chatted a couple times off camera, and I'm not mincing my words when I say like really look up to you and what you've built, and the whole mentorship piece and looking for role models is something that I'm very prominent on this time of life. So where can people find more about you, learn about Brandcamp, and get in touch?
Well, the agency is our site is Conspire with .us, so conspirewith.us, and Brandcamp is brandcampwith.us. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, and hopefully I'll see you out there in person if you're in the Columbus area.
Okay.
Don't be a stranger. I'll be out networking and pounding the pavement with Andy.
Yeah, looking forward to it, man. Cool.